Welcome in, friends and future friends, to this episode of the Sports and the World podcast. I'm LaDarius. Hope all of you are well and safe today. A lot on the menu. We're going to talk about NBA playoffs, little WNBA, maybe a little baseball, and I want to talk about gratitude on the back end of this week's episode. Haley's not here. She got a promotion. First of all, clap for her. And she's traveling, so if she's listening, hi. And And so we have a comment from John Brooks saying, "What up, broski? What is up?" And I hope all of you are well and safe, as I mentioned. Um, you can watch the episode, watch it through my YouTube. You can watch it through my Twitter channel as well. I'm wearing my Becky Lynch shirt. I'm wearing the man. So it's gonna be a good show. And let's just jump into these playoffs. Um, these NBA playoffs. I know we'll talk about hockey at some point. We will. I like the Avalanche. I do. But these NBA playoffs, and it brings into conversation. We talk about sports, and when it comes to the postseason, just how we talk about the NBA, like the NBA playoffs, especially this season, is hitting absolutely on fire. And what I love about these playoffs, and there's been some blowouts, sure, but nonetheless, it's always fun and enjoyable to watch. And we what we got from OKC and San Antonio, um, I feel that's a 7 game series. I don't see a scenario where it does not go 7 games, and I'll get to more into the details about that. And there's a key stat that concerns me about San Antonio, and we'll get into that. You guys probably watched it and saw it as well. But let's talk about tonight's game. Let's talk about game 2, where it's the Cavs and the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. This series intrigues me because I said this on an episode. I think it was the most recent episode or a episode back ago, where I talked about like this series is the pressures on New York. I think when you fire Tom Thibodeau and you bring in Mike Brown, upgrade, downgrade. I shared my thoughts on that. But the goal is to get to the finals. It's finals or bust. That was the mission. That was from the word go, and they played like a team that's on a mission to get to the NBA finals. And with this Cavs team last night, listen, as a Falcons fan, I know blown leads, all right, 20-3. I hear it all the time. But I think it's very important to talk about how in that fourth quarter. And we can talk about Jalen Brunson in the fourth quarter. 15 points, and he went 7 of 9 from the field. He shot almost 78% from the field. Now, the Cavs as a team in that final quarter, 18 points, and they shot a little over 29% from the field. It felt like a cataclysmic collapse. And then overtime, it just didn't feel that there was no momentum to be given. So I just think that at the end of the day, like Jalen Brunson took over, and the Knicks win. Tonight, to me, the key is if you're Cleveland, you got to refocus and win in the Garden. I think Donovan Mitchell has to do, like James Harden. Playoff Harden has been pretty good. Not gonna lie, he's been pretty good. But I think the reality is that can he be better? And penultimately, that is the question: is can he? Because listen, he got exposed. He got exposed against Brunson in that fourth quarter. So, you know, I really like, this is one matchup where I really like both teams. Not saying I don't like OKC or San Antonio, but this just feels that it's like this Knicks team is like on a mission, like how the Blues brother on a mission from God. I think the Knicks are on a mission to to get to the NBA Finals. I don't imagine a season where I don't know how you not get to the finals. It would be seen as a disappointment if you don't get to the final. And I think the way Jalen Brunson's play, I expect Carly Towns to play, but you got OJ Anube, like they're going to be fine. For the Cavs, it's like, to me, the side situation with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, that intrigues me as well. I think they have an advantage there, Cleveland does, and I'm curious to see what kind of game we're gonna get out of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And I expect Donovan to play well. I expect Harden. It's like I look at Jared Allen and I look at Evan Mobley, like especially when the series when they played Detroit, they did very well. I'm curious to see how they face this Knicks team and what are we going to get from them from a production perspective. And now let's shift gears. Let's talk about the other series. Let's talk about OKC and let's talk about OKC and I'm going to say San Diego. Jesus, San Antonio. This series, like I said earlier, this has all the makings and the vibes of going seven seven games. Um, Here's the thing, and you watched it and you saw turnovers, and going to the game three tomorrow. Here's the thing: the Spurs 44 turnovers to OKC's 25. To me, offense, defense, I feel they're pretty even. We look at their offensive rating and defensive rating, they're literally flip flop. 115 defensive rating for San Antonio, and there's a 114 defensive rating for OKC. And when you you flip it around, it's 114 offensive rating for the Spurs and 115 for OKC. So when you look at this matchup, I think the big concern is San Antonio just has to hold on to the ball. I really do believe that. I think Wimby can only do so much. I also feel that we have Wimby, you have SGA, and it's going to be the cast. As it always comes to the postseasons, you need your stars to step up, and I'm hopefully that will be the case this time around. And you know what? I know there's no questions, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop in the StreamYard link. And if you want to hop in just for a couple of minutes, you can. If not, no worries. If you don't want, if you're busy, hey, life happens. I totally get it. And we could talk about, if you want, you can actually ask your questions there. I'm going to put it on in the YouTube link, and I'm going to put it as well on Twitter if you want to drop in. And so shifting gear, this might be a relatively short show. But I did want to get that off because I just think Reggie Miller and Jamal Crawford, they talked about this playoff basketball. They talked about how possessions are important, and you can't win basketball games if you're turning over the ball. And San Antonio, great team all season, and you're facing a great team at OKC. It's the playoffs, it's the Western Conference, it's the two best teams literally in the conference because they're the 1 and 2 seeds in OKC and San Antonio respectively. So my thing is this is I think the key is simply, like I said, keeping possessions matter. I think especially in postseason, I think in any sport, whether it's possessions in basketball, uh, drives, and possessions in the NFL, and in basketball, in the postseason matters. Baseball is the at bats, it's the matchups that kind of matter, and so with hockey, you could throw in the same situation. It's about taking advantage of a situation and seeing what you get. I think this series is going to go seven. I can make a case, and a lot of you can make a case for either team to be in the NBA Finals. I just think for San Antonio, once again, I emphasize it because I think it's important. Possessions matter, and I hope that they kind of figure that out. I think they would. And for OKC, it's just listen, I hope I hope he's healthy, you know, and the supporting cast for OKC, they got the deepest bench in the NBA. And for anybody, if you know, you know. So, so in that regard, when you look at that, and so, and I do want to stick in the NBA. I want to talk about the NBA MVP voting. Staying in the NBA. Like I said, it might be NBA centric today. I do have a WNBA topic to concern about, but we'll get there when we get there. So when I look at the MVP voting, Shea winning back to back MVPs, and it's to the surprise of, I guess, a few. I guess I don't know if people are really that surprised, but here's the thing: it's not so much of the way he won it. It's like, I think George Barkley said it. It's the gap in which he won it in that really kind of took people aback. And I think the reality is, to me, there's key stats that really jump out. And the reality is that, to me, I have stats that I think are important. And everybody has stats they feel are important. And sorry, I've been working on this light while I was talking to you guys. Apologies. Um, if you rewatch, you're not going to see me do it. But if you see me do it, you're like, okay, we can see me. Um, so how the voting went. So when you look at how the voting went, so you look at the NBA, you look at MVP voting, it was quite interesting. And like I said, it was a little bit on the surprising side when it comes to the votes and things like that. So Shea Gillis Alexander, when we look at it here, he ran away with the award. He absolutely ran away with it, and it wasn't even. He had 83 first place votes. Second was Jokic with 10. Wembanyama had 5. Cade Cunningham had 2. And it's really fascinating. And this also speaks to me something that I think people are already seeing and need to come to the realization about. I think when it comes to the league and how the global impact. Think about this, because somebody brought this up. I said the last American to win this award was James Harden back in 2017, 2018. You had Shy back to back, Jokic back in 2023, Embiid in 2022, Jokic ran it back to back in 2020 and 2021. Giannis ran it back to back in 2019, 2018 and 2019, and Harden won it in 2017. And do I think it's an important thing to talk about? Yes, because the global aspect. Basketball, the rest of the world is catching up. People say, "Oh, Darius, that's obvious." But when you go look at the voting in the MVPs, baseball I think, was the first sport to really have the global impact in terms of the international stars. You can go back to the greats, Roberto Clemente, you had Tony Perez, you had Juan Mer, you had stars back then. And then you can make in the NBA kind of figured it out back in the 90s when we played back the 1992 Dream Team was war. And then now you fast forward that aspect over 30 years later, we're getting that 30 plus years later where the rest of the world is caught up. And you see it in the league. And football, you see the NFL trying to do the very same thing, making the game global. and and I think in time they'll have that global impact in terms of the players. There's a couple of international players in the league. Don't get me wrong, but when's that global impact going to happen? You're going to see it in the NFL as well. And but another thing with the Shea Gilgeous thing, and I look at two key stats like I mentioned before. I went on a side tangent. The two stats I look at win shares and VORP, which is value over replacement player. And my buddy Tanya Ray Fox, she brought it up in the stat when she made her case when she talked about Klay Thompson. It's a very important stat because it means how valuable you are to your team. So the win shares, Shea had 15.2 to Jokic 14.9. For the VORP, Jokic was 9.2, Shea was 7.8. So that's why I think the voting was surprising. I thought it would be closer. It was really between Shea and Jokic. It really was. Like with Wembanyama's he's gonna win multiple MVPs. You don't have to worry about. He's gonna go to win. Listen, the way he's playing deep. By the way, defense. He plays both sides of the ball very well, and that's not a knock on Shea. That's not a knock on Nikola Jokic. That's a man who, if you saw the game, somebody drove in rookie seat, and they like listen. They said thanks, but no thanks, and they immediately passed the ball back out to the. I think they passed back out to the perimeter. But my biggest thing is before I switch to another NBA topic is that going back to how we look at the MVP voting, I think how do we define most valuable? Because people say, well, Jokic is more valuable to the sure, and he has multiple MVPs. But when Shea Gilgeous Alexander is Shea Gilgeous Alexander, it's hard to make a case not to him to get it. And then what made it shocking was the voting spread, like I read out to you, like the number of first place votes that he got. Think about this. Think about this. When you look at the number of first place votes that he got, 83. Here's the thing. Luka was fourth in the MVP voting, but Cade Cunningham had two first place votes and he finished fifth. You could take that what you will. And the fact of the matter is that it's the gap. It's like maybe some of those Shea votes you could have split and gave to the Jokic, and Wemby should have maybe got more first place votes. Matter of opinion. Let me know what you think. I think I'm not upset about it. I don't think it's worth to be upset about, to be honest. So yeah, that's my MVP. I say you look at VORP and you look at value replacement. I think they're two very important stats when you do look at the the NBA. Now I want to stick to coaching because I didn't talk about it on last week's show, and with the amazing Haley because we had much to talk about. We were going on hiatus for a while, so my thing is I want to talk about the Mavericks firing Jason Kidd, and I want to talk about the Magic opening. I think those are the only two NBA head coach openings, I believe. And somebody can correct me in the chat because they hired the Pelicans hired Jamal Mosley, so which I think is the sound hire. And people may look at the resume and like, no, it's good. And so yeah, it's Orlando and Chicago. And it's interesting. People were shocked that Jason Kidd got fired, given that they won the West just 2 seasons ago? 2 seasons ago. And it's shocking, but it's new management. Masai Ujiri. I apologize. He was hired as lead executive back in this month, and he wants to put his stamp on the team. And listen, what makes the job attractive is all about Cooper Flag. It's Cooper Flag. That's what appeals to a potential coach. You have a chance to coach Cooper Flag. The downside is they're a very old team. Outside of Cooper Flag, you still got Kyrie. You have to figure out some things the age perspective, injury perspective. It's not a terrible job. But with Kidd, listen, he was literally a 500 coach with them, 205, 205. So while the shocking may be the fire may be shocking, it does not, because when an executive comes in, when you bring in new brass, they want to bring in somebody who they know, and the job is going to be appealing because of Cooper Flag. You got to figure out the Kyrie Irving stuff. You got to figure out other stuff. But how do you build around Cooper Flag? That's what this job is going to really center around. Is how do you build around a guy like Cooper Flag? And then the Magic, like I said, fire Jamal Mosley with the Pelicans. The name I hear tossed out there is is Billy Donovan, who in Chicago, who also has the head coaching open, the other head coaching open. No, well, now the third head coach, excuse me. So now, along with Orlando and Chicago, Dallas has it open. And with Billy Donovan, I like Billy Donovan. I'm a Gators guy. He did great at OKC, almost 61% win percentage. With the Bulls, just I think first one, sub 500. And this is the recycling of coaches, and this is the problem. I like Jason Kidd and I like Billy Donovan, but see, look what happened when they tried to bring back Glenn Doc Rivers, who was I think he was announcing, he was in broadcasting again, and you bring him in for the Bucks, and it didn't work out so great. Depending on, I'm not going into the conjecture or anything like that. I'll leave that for you, the American viewing audience, to kind of decipher. But I have a name who I feel would be perfect to me, specifically for Orlando. I'm selfish. I live in Florida. I'm very, and that's Sam Cassell. We talk about the great assistants, and it's amazing to me that Sam Cassell, given that everybody who he's worked with, coaching, they've got maybe at least a second chance. Sam Cassell deserves a look, especially if you're Dallas and Orlando, because you're kind of in rebuilding. For Orlando, you're closer to a championship maybe than Dallas. I don't know what that says. I think Orlando's thing is that I personally feel you can't bring back Paolo Banchero. You you can't Desmond Bain and Jalen Suggs or Martin. Like, you can't bring that core back. And I like Paolo. I like those guys, but I don't see a way that you can bring all of them back. And I think they have to go out. And I honestly, I put them in the Giannis sweepstakes. If you can package a deal and get Giannis Antetokounmpo, two-time MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo, you make that deal. And more than likely, and people are like, oh, Paolo's not great. Trust me, they're going to want Paolo. They're going to want Banchero. Bain is right there, but Paolo, this offseason is all about finding a star to bring to Orlando. Because I think we tried the Paolo Banchero, we tried the Paolo Banchero, Desmond Bain, Jalen Suggs experience. We tried it, didn't work. It's okay. Dallas has to focus on how do we move cap, how do we kind of move some of these older players off. And for Chicago, it's like, how can we find a coach who wants to coach this team? And Portland has a head coaching open, which makes no sense because it's the ownership there. And let me just sidetrack here. The ownership in Portland is terrible. Terrible. Tiago Splitter took over a team. The head coach got arrested. Okay, the head coach didn't resign. The head coach didn't, have nothing but he got arrested. And Tiago Splitter deserves to be a candidate for that job. You got Donovan Clingan. You got Dingy Avagia. You have talent there. It's management. And 9 times out of 10 with franchises like Portland, it's management. Who wants this job? Because at the end of the day, while Avdija and Cleveland are great, Who wants that job? Who wants to coach that team? Because of ownership. And that's a legit concern and a legit question. Now, when you look at for the Bulls, outside of Giddy, maybe, and Buzelis, what's there? But if you ask people what job you want of these openings, the Mavericks job looks great, and the Magic job looks great because ownership in Portland and in Chicago, which is why Billy Donovan's out of a job, and I like Billy Donovan, like I'll keep saying. And they pay essentially kid. It's not about money. Let's be clear. For neither for Kid or Donovan, it's about what fits best. And if I'm the Orlando Magic, if you want to go after Billy Donovan, fine. If you want to go after Jason Kidd, fine. But I'm telling you, my guy is Sam Cassell. You need to turn the page. Hiring the recycle coach listen. Doc Rivers is he was in broadcast. Hey, let's bring him in, and now he's out. So at some point, when are we going to understand is that hey, he was hired simply because he has a championship on the resume, and there's a lot. Listen, there's a lot of coaches and a lot of dudes who have resumes like it. Doesn't mean they're qualified. Doesn't mean that at all. The fact of the matter is simply this. You have to start looking another like the Pelicans, they were interested in Cassell, but they went with Jamal Mosley, which is fine. It's just his second go around. But for Jason Kidd, yeah, he's with the Nets, the Bucks, and with the Mavs. Billy Donovan, OKC, and the Bulls. And respectfully, listen, Kidd was 500 with the Mavs, and he was below 500 with the Bucks. And the one season he had with the Nets, he was above 500. It's the playoffs. Neither one of these coaches, to my outside of like Jason Kidd taking him to the Western Conference 2 seasons ago, if Jason Kidd had a championship, I'd be promoting the heck out of Jason Kidd. But I can't do that with the straight face and all-time conscience. I can't do that. I like Billy Donovan. There's too many great coaching candidates out there. I hope they figure it out. I really, really do. And shifting gears before we get out of here, I want to talk about the WNBA quickly and talk about gratitude. Because I was going to talk about gratitude, but now something else happened, and it makes me add to the gratitude. And it's about all of you who are listening and or watching. Speaking of which, like, listen, and subscribe to this podcast, and listen to this episode, every episode of this podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. So, shifting back, with Caitlin Clark. Now, she didn't play last night versus Portland, which, listen, respectfully, they didn't really need her. With Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell, doing jump, and Lexi Hall. We don't talk about. I said this previously. I'm like, that Fever team plays pretty well without Caitlin Clark. Doesn't mean they need Caitlin Clark. Don't get me wrong. If they want to be championship contenders, they need her. But I'm just saying, Caitlin Clark can sit out, and it feels like this squad is deep enough to get there. And that's why I love when you expand these rosters, you get talent and you get the depth needed to rest your stars a game or two. In the NBA, they do it all the time. Why can't the WNBA do it? Anyway, so there's a report, and I want to read it correctly. I want to be correct. That she didn't play because of it's reported she had a back injury. Which, if that's the case, I get why head coach Stephanie White, and I understand why the management did it. But there are reports that the injury situation they might be in trouble. And when you're taking a read here per Yahoo Sports, is that she sat out with the sore back and says that she woke, Coach White said that she woke up with stiffness in the back. And that's what she told WNBA.com. But, however, per Yahoo Sports, the timing of the decision is what the issue is, that she told us less than 2 hours. The WNBA rules, I think the NBA is kind of similar in that regard. Player availability information must be submitted by 5 p.m. the day before the game, unless it's the second game of a back-to-back. And I don't believe that was the case here. The Fever previous game, correct? I was correct. Was on, I believe, Sunday. She didn't practice Tuesday, so here's the thing. I'm not going to accuse the Indiana Fever of any sort of malfeasance or anything like that. What I will say is that if she was injured, and if she just woke up with a back injury, could you have had her active and just played her minimal minutes? Because by sitting her all together, now we're in this little sticky situation. And like I said, I don't know what the leagues, how they're going to handle it, but that's something I want to talk about. I'm very intrigued about. So, with that being said, I want to get you guys out of here, get you guys ready to watch some playoff, watch some baseball, all that amazing stuff. So, I want to talk about gratitude before we get out of here. And I was going to talk about being thankful for you guys, because I always mention that there's no me without you guys. Taking time out of your day and schedule. And like I said, if there's a better time and day to do this, I will adjust my schedule and we can make it work. We'll make it work, especially in the evening time. I know a lot of people work like me, other countless people, they work and they have other life obligations. But I the gratitude now comes is that recently I was invited to play Scott Fishbowl for the fourth year in a row. I started back in, I think it was 13, 14, yeah, back in 2013. Always grateful to Scott Fish and what Fantasy Cares does. Donate. They didn't ask me to do this. I just feel like you should just do it. They're an amazing organization. Scott Fish, Fantasy Cares, do an amazing job. Donate to their cause. They're absolutely amazing. And buy a shirt, because I was wearing my Shrek shirt for a couple of days, because I one of the shirts they sell there in the shop. But I want to talk about the gratitude. Is where it's always important to understand that trust is absolutely everything. Even taking the time listening to me talking about sports and other stuff, it's the time, and I'm grateful that you do take the time out. And always the goal of this show is all about you guys. And I want to hear you guys feedback, drop questions all the time. I put the link in, I get the people are busy, and I get it. And I want to hear what you guys think, because you guys' opinion matters to me. We live in a world where it feels that if your opinion disagrees with the majority, you get drowned out. Or even if you agree in the minority, it gets drowned out even worse. And I feel that everybody's opinions matter, whether we agree or disagree on whatever topic. But we have to have that civil conversation and discussion. And I like to think that this is the place to do it. I'm not saying I'm better than any other great podcast that I listen to and watch. But the key is that when I watch is that it's about interaction. Hearing what you think. Because you could say, hey Darius, you're wrong. I disagree. And hey Darius, I agree. And I'm not going to be upset. If we can be civil about it, we can have that conversation. So, and that's why I say with the gratitude is that I'm grateful that you've allowed me on this platform. And I'll say multiple times is that at the end of the day, we live in this world where sometimes we don't feel that we're enough. And I'm letting you know that you are enough and that you should be heard, because your voice, your opinion matters. And that to me is one of the staples that makes America great. And at the end of the day, may I agree with the president, whatever we may do, I value your opinion. I value everything that you bring. And I'm going to be here. We talk about sports and the world. So we can have those conversations because I have a different point of view than you for a multitude of reasons. So I feel that's I think that's a wrap for all of you that took the time out of your day. Excuse me, and you listened. I forever grateful and forever appreciative. And until you see and or hear me again next time, once again, shout out to Haley traveling. And if she's listening, congrats her promotion. Shout out to her. Our friends and future friends, be real, be you, be blessed, and be safe from all of us here from the Sports and the World podcast.